this is one reason, by the way, that I'm pretty evangelistic about retreats. I think everyone should try to find the time to do a full, like, serious silent meditation retreat of a week or longer if they can. I've recommended that to, I can think of about a dozen people that have done that on my personal recommendation, and they're all glad they did. Some gladder than others, but nobody considered it wasted time. Which isn't to say that bad things can't happen. It's weird. You can have bad experiences on retreat. It happens, but for most people, I think it's a good thing. A large majority of people.
Yeah, and the tradition we were talking about before, the Goenka Vipassana, the 10-day retreats are actually kind of seen as the beginning of your practice, right? They're seen as you're actually told to go on a 10-day retreat. That teaches, they say basically don't learn the method anywhere else. Come to the retreat, learn the method, do it for 10 days, and it's intense. You know, it's one of the most intense things I would say I've ever done. Mm-hmm. But I completely agree that it's kind of necessary often. You know, the first 3 days can just be kind of getting over your conditioning, you know, to kind of all the alarm bells going off that this isn't right. Why am I wasting my time here? And until you really kind of mm-hmm. break through and get some really, you can start to really understand what it's about. Is that what happened with you? Did you feel like you really started to kind of understand the value of meditation after retreat?
Yeah, I mean, the first big threshold for me was on my first retreat in 2003 was, and I mean, the first couple of days were just absolute hell. I hated it. I have, you know, pretty much attention deficit disorder. So it's hard for me to focus on my breath. I assumed everyone else was doing it better than I was, although you don't know because it's silent. You're not talking to them. But my first big kind of breakthrough was I had a little too much coffee in the morning, and I had this kind of jittery feeling in my jaw, you know, kind of clenched jaw. And it was unpleasant. And I'm sitting there meditating thinking, oh shit, now I can't meditate. And then just kind of suddenly I thought, I had this feeling like, but wait, the feeling is down there in my jaw and I'm not in my jaw. And suddenly I was just observing the feeling. I was no longer having it. I was no longer identifying with it. And that was amazing to me. And subsequently, you know, when things go well, I've done that with like anxiety, with sadness. You know, and I'd say to people, if you're feeling sad, even if you haven't been on a retreat and don't meditate, sit down, close your eyes, and just experience the sadness. Try to observe the sadness. Where is it in your head? Where is the feeling? What are the contours of the feeling? Does it pulse? Just observe it and see if that alone, after some number of minutes, doesn't change your relationship to it in a productive way. Anyway, the second big experience I had on that retreat was I had a full out psychedelic experience. I mean, and I haven't had anything like it since. Some people do, some people don't. But this was like, I described it at the end of the book. It was pretty wild and utterly blissful. I mean, I describe it, I mean, I've never, you know, taken LSD and heroin, you know, like, you know, but I imagine that's what it would be like if you did both, like, you know, it was psychedelic, but utterly kind of blissful. But that's not the point of mindfulness meditation. There are meditative traditions where the point is to have visions and to do all kinds of wild stuff. But in the Vipassana tradition, which is closely associated with mindfulness meditation, the point is, in a sense, more modest, but in a way more profound, which is just to change your relationship to what you think of yourself, your feelings, your thoughts, and to the world, in ways that are actually in accordance with these ideas we've alluded to, not self and emptiness.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that you said with the pain that you felt like you weren't, you know, there was some distance between you and it. It sounded like the way you described it. I mean, it can be hard to describe mm-hmm. these experiences, because I think I feel like I've had a similar experience, but I maybe would have described it as feeling fully coincident with it. It maybe they're two kind of extreme ways of describing the same thing, where there just is the sensation and the feeling of you being the self that's wrestling with it goes away. And that can either feel like you are consciousness in
well,
which
that's the that's the irony, is that, and that's why people argue over the right terminology. I think everyone would say you're talking about feeling non-attached. All Buddhists might say that. But if you say I was feeling detached from the feeling, there's some people who want to argue with you. And that's partly maybe because people have different experiences, and some people emphasize more what I emphasize, some people more what you emphasize. But I do think they're two sides of the same coin, at least in this sense, which is there is this irony that, you know, an unpleasant feeling is something you try to get away from. Anxiety, guilt, or you try to think something that'll make it go away. You try to say something to somebody that'll help it go away. You're actually kind of running from it. But if you just accept it and start observing it, as I said, like with that sadness, just observe the feeling. Then you start, although in a sense you're then finally getting close to it. You're no longer afraid of it. What results from that is, I would say, a more objective view of the feeling. And now that may not feel like literal distance. To me, it does feel a little like that. Like when I'm viewing, like if I view anxiety in a way that gets it to completely release its grip on me, I do feel as if I'm kind of observing it kind of from up here, and it's this contour of feeling in my body. And it's just interesting. It's just like a piece of abstract sculpture or something. It's just interesting. It's no longer unpleasant. I do feel I'm viewing it from some distance, but it is certainly true that perception is closely intertwined with getting right up close to it and not being afraid of it and immersing yourself in it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's two sides of the same coin. You can emphasize one or the other. And the thing that's not controversial is what you said, that it's to do with non-attachment, right? That's what gets you to these states. And I had a similar experience where I had this excruciating knee pain on maybe like day 8 of this meditation retreat. And after about 40 minutes of sitting with it and really desperately wanting to get up and move it, I think I must have finally surrendered to it, because it, as you say, it felt like I was looking at just an incredible, like a piece of abstract art or something. It just felt intense. It no longer felt bad. It just felt very intense. And I could have tipped to that moment. I think moment to moment, I could have felt it was intensely blissful or just intensely neutral.
Right.
And I remember the moment I was kind of bathed in this pleasure of this intensity. And the moment the bell rang and my mind kind of came back to my thoughts, it was excruciating again in an instant. That was one of the most insightful moments for me, was seeing my attention goes, the thoughts come in, and immediately I'm suffering, which was fascinating.
Right. No, these unpleasant feelings can actually seem beautiful. Now, if you have serious pain that signifies a medical emergency, you should tend to it. But you know, I had on a retreat, I had what turned out to be an abscessed tooth, and I found that if I drank water, it would really trigger it and make it feel bad. So I figured as an experiment, I would like meditate for like 25 minutes in my room, get into a deep state, and then have the water. And it was interesting. It was like, it kind of was right on the edge between beautiful and painful. So like it would just be like this wave of pain. And at times you would just go, whoa, that's a beautiful wave of pain. And then you'd go like, whoa, but it is pain. You know, it was kind of, I didn't quite get to complete bliss, but there were sustained periods of actually considering it beautiful.